Warning, this video is highly subjective and my opinions are based on my own perceptions of the books. Feel free to share yours in the comments. This is probably controversial. Greetings, my name is Nina, welcome back to my channel. To be honest, I thought I wouldn't make this video, but here I am doing it. I don't really talk about books that I hate or dislike or am disappointed in. To be honest, I dedicate my channel to books that I actually liked, at least for a while. And in this video, I really want to talk about books that I read in recent years that haven't been rainbows and sunshine. They weren't for me at best and were terrible at worst. The good thing is that I have forgotten most of these books. I mean that I forgot that I read them, and that's great. This is one of the reasons I do not talk about disappointing books here. I do not want to be reminded of these books. So allow me to name the books that I didn't like. Let's start with soft examples. I didn't like these books, but they were quite good, just weren't for me. And there are two books, both sci-fi. One is Do the Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, aka the Blade Runner book. To be honest, I struggle with saying the title of the book, the original one, so I'd rather go on with the Blade Runner book. I watched the Blade Runner in 2020. I liked the film, even though it was very slow. I guess I should rewatch the film. I just think that all the core ideas that were in the book were implemented very well in the film, and this is a really rare case where the film was simply better than the book. And the second book is The Dispossessed by Ursula K. Le Guin. Recently, I gave the book away to the library. The book has a really good concept. So here we have two planets, and one planet is anarchistic and the other planet is orderly. And the scientist from anarchistic planet goes to orderly planet and discovers that it's all a trap. The concept is very good, but the realization, not so much. I thought that the two planets were way too different from each other. I thought that it was way too... how to say it in English? Hypertrophirovana. I do not know how to say that in English. I will have to look that up. I mean that the realization of the book wasn't the best, and I do remember watching the book Leo, where she said that this book would have been better as a non-fiction essay or something. At first I didn't want to agree with her, but now I do, because while the book had very good ideas, the implementation wasn't the best. I thought the book was kinda boring and kinda underwhelming. But the ideas were very good anyway. Okay, the next category is different because while I do not really hate the books, but I do dislike them. I do dislike these books. Okay, I do recognize the fact that I simplify the books into it was dull, it was underwhelming, it wasn't that great. Yeah, I know that this is very simplistic, but I will try to be laconic here. And for the most part, most books I do not really remember, luckily. So I do remember that I really disliked Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. This is the fourth book in the Dark Tower series. Why I dislike this book is very simple, is because, spoiler, if you are still reading the Dark Tower series and haven't reached book 4, or you are about to get into the Dark Tower, spoiler alert, this book is one giant flashback. Here's what happens in the book. At the beginning, spoilers, they defeat Blaine Mono. I think this is the best part in the book. I like the fact that it's Eddie who defeats Mono, because Mono is all about logic, and Eddie defeats Mono by being absolutely illogical. That was brilliant. I really liked it. But then Roland starts talking about his youth with his two friends, and so they are sent to the west. And then we also meet this girl named Susan Delgado, who goes to this witch to get tested. And on her way back, she meets Roland, and then she asks him to pretend as if they haven't met before. I mean, there's a party, I remember, and then we have Roland and Susan. And guess what happens next? Yeah, I hated it. I hated how Roland behaved in that book. I hated how he treated his friends and even Susan herself. I did kind of feel sorry for Susan, but she was really annoying, and so was her aunt. Her aunt was much worse than her. But I do remember very well the scene with this guy, Eldred Jonas, spoiler, vandalizes Roland's room. Vandalism is a very frequent topic in Stephen King's novels. I do remember reading Cujo. I dumped that book, but there was this scene of vandalizing. I do remember that. I still didn't like the book because I hated how everything was about Roland and Susan and how he acted and how it all went down. I hated it. Okay, I did not really hate Wizard and Glass, but I was incredibly disappointed in that one. I read so far only 5 The Dark Tower books. I did not finish the series, I gave it away, and out of all 5 books, I think this one is the worst. But hey, this Dark Tower series are still very good. It's still more or less a good book compared to others in this video. The next book, I can't say that I hate the book, but this book was an empty book. This is probably one of the emptiest books that I ever read. The book is really popular, but it has no substance, and this book has a lot of fans. And probably if they are watching this video, they're going to be really mad. But I'm going to say it anyway. I really felt nothing, at least nothing positive for Normal People by Sally Rooney. I do understand why this book is popular, I can understand that. I guess some people do really relate to the main characters. Maybe they struggle with communication or something. To be honest, the concept of the book, well, we have these 2 different people from very different backgrounds who struggle to communicate. This would have been a really good book if it went somewhere. The book goes completely nowhere. I think the book is completely empty of any substance and devoid or anything that would make the book really good. And the worst part is that Sally Rooney inserts her commentary that is completely out of place. There's a constant commentary in the book, constant where it doesn't really belong. Well, while reading the book, I felt like this book was written by a social media activist. It feels like that. Wait a minute, if Normal People is really popular right now, does this signal a really disturbing trend in modern literature? No substance, all commentary? Okay, I'm actually lying to you. I need to confess that I do not even dislike the book because it has to have some substance for me to dislike the book. All the other books in this video, they do have at least some substance for me to dislike it, and Normal People felt so empty that I just feel nothing. It just wasn't that terrible, and that's the best thing I can say about the book. I'm really sorry to all the Sally Rooney fans. It's a hipster literature that isn't really full of substance, but I don't know, maybe that's the point of the novel. Maybe this is what audience likes these days, or maybe Sally Rooney created a new trend in literature. I do not know. Anyway, the book wasn't my thing. I was very indifferent to the book. It was so meh. Let's move on. Third book I do not really remember very well. That's very good because the only thing I remember of the book is that I read it. I really hoped to like it, but I didn't. It's a Russian classics. It's The White Guard by Mikhail Bulgakov. At the time of reading, that was late 2020, I really wanted to read some Russian classics. Unfortunately, I picked up the wrong book. I do really like complex stuff, but this book did absolutely nothing for me, and this is why I did not like it back then, and nowadays I remember literally nothing about The White Guard, and I'm not planning to read it again. Moving on. Okay, the next category would be a book that I actually had high hopes for, but I was actually really disappointed because I expected more. This book started out pretty well. It had a good beginning. But then, as the book went on, I was slowly losing interest, but I still finished it. The book is called Look Who's Talking To by Timur Farmesh. Okay, I expected more from the book, where Adolf Hitler wakes up in modern Germany. I did not really enjoy the book because it took a completely different direction, could have been done better. And by the way, the film was much better than the book. And one of the actors in the film, later I found out, is also in the show Dark from Netflix. But hey, all of these books that I mentioned so far were the light category. Now we go into a heavier category of books that I actually kinda hate. Yes, I do really hate them. The good thing is that I do not own any of these books anymore. None of them are on my shelves, except for one, and for a good reason. Okay, here are the books that I actually hate. I hate them a lot. So, number one book that comes to my mind is Gloriana or the Unfulfilled Queen by Michael Moorcock. This is the first Michael Moorcock book that I read. Prior to buying Gloriana, I have heard of the Elric saga, and I have all the Elric books now on my Kindle, and I hope that I actually enjoy the books. And unlike Gloriana, I fucking hate Gloriana. Okay, I'm actually really glad that the people do not really talk about this book very much. I'm glad that this isn't something you would see on TikTok or YouTube, or at least you rarely see that, and I hope that it doesn't become that popular because it shouldn't be popular because it freaking sucks. Okay, the concept of the book was actually really exciting. So 20 years ago, a wicked king was defeated and his daughter ascended the throne. So her rule is basically the golden age of this kingdom called Albion. Among the queen's court, you have this chancellor who supports the kingdom, and then he hires somebody who is treacherous. And when treason happens, everybody is in danger, including the queen. Sounds cool, right? Well, wrong. Do you know what really happens? The entire book is dedicated to Gloriana's satisfaction, if you know what I mean. So the full title of this book is Gloriana or the Unfulfilled Queen. But in the Russian translation, I had the Russian copy, it was simply Gloriana, and I felt like this book had deceived me. Because I hated it because instead of actual interesting plot points, instead of actual interesting dialogue, instead of all of the exciting things, I only got the queen who was all rainbows and sunshine on the surface, but deep inside she was suffering, and everybody was thinking about what was going on in her bed. All of her problems were tied to her bed. You know what? Given what I'm saying here, it would have been much more interesting if she had sleep problems. Sleep problems would have been better. Oh, yes, sleep problems, and then the queen goes insane, and there's the danger that she might turn out like her father. That would have been much more interesting than what we got in the end. I just came up with a much more interesting concept that Moorcock did. So the culmination of the book was really dull. It wasn't exciting. I expected some kind of a really big, grand outcome. Okay, if you read the book, you probably know. If you haven't, I'd rather not speak about it. But I do need to warn you, if you're going to read the book, you'd rather not, that the book has two endings. One ending is enforced. I mean, there's an action that's enforced there. And in the other, the same action is happening at will. If you know, you know. And by the way, Michael Moorcock decided that the entire rock album dedicated to Gloriana was a good idea. My edition of the book mentioned that. Yeah, Moorcock participated in making a rock album dedicated to Gloriana. It was a concept album. Okay, the next book that I absolutely freaking hate. This book is classics. Yeah, I understand why people would love it, the book, but I didn't like it, and not for the reasons you think. I really didn't like Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. You'd probably think that I disliked the book because of controversy. No, that's not the reason I dislike the book. Okay, I do actually understand why that people love the book for the same reason I dislike it. But excuse me, but I'm not a huge fan of water in the text. If you have seen my previous videos, you probably know that I frequently mention the phrase water in the text, because in Russian, water in the text means some extra additional text. In Nabokov's defense, the text is related to the novel, but it was still too much. I think the novel would have been much better if it was less full of water, text water. I forced myself to finish Lolita because I really wanted to abandon that book. It was way too dull for me. Next book that I dislike is Dandelion Wine by Ray Bradbury, because this is an even bigger deception than Gloriana. From the annotation of the book, it's about a boy and his summer, how he spent his summer holidays. I expected the book to be warm and sunny. I expected warmth, but instead the book sucked out all the positivity out of me, and the book nearly made me feel depressed. I'm just so glad that I do not remember too much from the book, but I do remember the book being way too depressive for me, and I do remember that towards the end, spoiler alert, the boy got ill. The book should have been about warmth and positivity, and instead all I got from the book is negativity. I'd rather not talk about it again. I thought that the book was way too depressing. I did not see sunshine and the warmth. I did not see that. I only saw darkness and depression. That's all. Okay, the next book probably would be a controversial take, The Catcher in the Rye by Jerome Salinger. I thought that the book was full of whining. Okay, I know that some people say things like, oh, you should read this when you are a teenager in order to understand what Holden Caulfield is feeling, yada yada yada. You should be a teenager, blah blah blah. Now, when I think about it, this isn't a very good excuse. Basically, the whole book is Holden complaining. There is no plot, only Holden whining about everything. He hates this, he hates that, everything sucks, you name it. So I read the book at 20 and I didn't like it. Holden, for the most of the book, Holden is trying to spend his time before he goes home because he, spoiler, is expelled from school. And there's a lots and lots of whining. Whining, more whining. Okay, the next book I really did not like. Yeah, I know why this book has a lot of fans, but I didn't like it. When I was reading final pages, I was literally forcing myself to read it. And the book is The Kite Runner by Khalid Hosseini. Well, first of all, I really hated the main character. I hated the protagonist. At least when he is a child, I really wanted to slap him. Hassan deserved better. Well, I hated him because of how he treated Hassan. It is mentioned in the book, and these are the words coming from an antagonist, a villain basically, that the main character only plays with Hassan when other kids aren't available. And then they get to the US, the protagonist and his dad, they get to the US and I really wanted to fall asleep. And the final pages, I just didn't want to read the book anymore. If it was mostly the second half of the book, I would say that the book isn't for me. But then we have the first half with the kid protagonist, and I hate the book because of him. And this is why I consider the book one of the worst books that I read, even though I understand why people love it. The main character in the first half of the book is one of the worst main characters I've read about. Now here comes the book, the only book of all the disliked books that I actually own, for only one reason. It's a part of the series. And the book is The Amber Spyglass by Philip Pullman. This is the third book of his Dark Materials. I absolutely hated this book. Because the book wasted all of the most interesting aspects. It wasted everything. You could have had the interesting battles. You could have had Lord Asriel fighting the authority, or that would have been really interesting to observe. that was all wasted in the third book, and what we got instead. And then the world got saved. And guess what saved the world? You have two little kids playing Adam and Eve. And this is the culmination, ladies and gentlemen. This is what saves the world. Hell, even if we got a magical fairy with magical singing stopping the battle with her singing, his or her singing, that would have been much more compelling than what we got in the Amber Spyglass. Amber Spyglass wasted everything in favor of two little kids doing sappy things. After I finished the book, I had a bitter aftertaste. But you know, even the worst part, what made the book for me even worse is that the whole thing came out of nowhere. Why did she like him very much? Here come a few spoilers for the Amber Spyglass, so be ready. So there we have the scientist Mary Malone telling Lyra and Will how she fell in love. She was basically calling it going to China or something. So anyway, she tells that story. And then all of a sudden, Lyra starts feeling something for Will after she heard the story. For me, this whole ordeal came out of nowhere. This story wasn't convincing enough. Yeah, I know that I hated the book mostly because epic battles were replaced by sappy romance. But the worst part is that the romance itself wasn't handled very well. So at the beginning of the book, spoilers, Lyra is kidnapped by Mrs. Coulter and Will saves her. You know what? If suddenly Lyra started having feelings she didn't know about for Will, if she didn't know about it, that would have been much more compelling. And the China story could have enhanced her feelings. That would have been much more compelling, but no. Okay, I really do not want to talk about the book again. I hated it so much. Like I said, I had a bitter aftertaste after reading the book. And now we have the last two books, and I'll try not to talk about them too much. They're both sci-fi novels. I didn't like Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. Okay, I give Ernest Cline credit for the world building, because yeah, everything was planned in detail. I liked it. Okay, I do not hate the 80s reference, especially given that they play a massive role in the plot. You know, one of the reasons I dislike the book is that towards the end, I felt like the book was way too moralistic. Okay, I do understand what the writer wanted to say. He wanted to point out how bad it is to be in a virtual world all the time and not to pay attention to the real world. I get that. But he didn't handle it very well. But then again, I'm also not a huge fan of stories where main characters spend 100% or at least 99% of their time in some kind of virtual reality and they become isolated. I do not like that. There's a reason why I have a really difficult relationship with sci-fi. Maybe I should make a separate video about it. Yes, I have a difficult relationship with sci-fi, and I will talk about and Ready Player One too. Now let's move on. And finally, the book that I read this year. I read it in May, in 2 days. One of the worst books that I read in my life. I thought that I would get a really cool story, especially given that the author wrote one of my all-time favorite books. And the book is Songmaster by Orson Scott Card. I really cannot believe that the same guy wrote my all-time favorite book, Ender's Game, and my all-time hated book, Songmaster. No, don't get me wrong. My hate for Songmaster did not affect my love for Ender's Game. I still love Ender's Game and always will. This is my top sci-fi novel. Why I hated Songmaster? The books had a really interesting concept. So we have this little boy named Ansett who is brought up in this sort of an academy or orphanage or whatever, where they're training singers. And then some of the singers they're sent to the emperor. And then Ansett is trained, and then he's sent to the emperor, and then it goes downhill from there. Okay, the book that had a lot of disturbing moments. I think Lolita did not have so many disturbing moments. Songmaster did. Songmaster made me incredibly uncomfortable. We all know what Lolita is famous for. Basically, the same thing happens in Songmaster. Well, almost. Okay, Songmaster isn't explicit. Songmaster doesn't depict the scenes Lolita does, but it's much more disturbing than Lolita. Or at least they are equally disturbing. But no, Songmaster is worse, because while reading Lolita, at least you know you are going to read a very disturbing book. You expect it to happen because you read the annotation and you know what you're going to read. But with Songmaster, okay, but the whole disturbing ordeal aside, maybe the reason I disliked the Songmaster is that I expected some kind of hero's journey. Maybe I expected growth. I expected Ansett to do great things. That didn't happen. The idea of the little kid trained to be the singers is really good. Excuse me, when you have a singer as your main character and there's a strong theme of music, I think the book should have been much more charming, but no, that's not what we got. You know what? Now, when I think about it, I really wanted to add Twilight by Stephanie Meyer into this list, but I decided against. And also, one thing I need to mention, so in 2021, on my second channel, I made a video disappointing books of 2021, and one of the books mentioned there was 21 Lessons for the 21st Century by Yuval Noah Harari. The reason I'm mentioning this is that after that book, I read Harari's other novels, Sapiens and Homo Deus, and now I'm considering giving 21 Lessons a second chance because I view the author and his books differently now, so maybe that's not going to be a disappointing read or, to be exact, controversial read. I called the book controversial, as I remember. Alright, that's all. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I never thought I would make this video because I really wanted to be honest before you that I did not like certain books. Name your own disliked books in the comments. See you next time. Goodbye.